Hey everyone, welcome back. As you can tell, I think I'm just going to be sick this entire semester. My voice is getting better and worse at the same time, so whatever it is, we're going to deal with it. But, so if you paid attention to my intro video, I did say that chapter 5 and 6, they are important. There's content to talk about, but the reality is there's probably not going to be as much note-taking as there was in the earlier chapters, just simply because there's a lot more discussion to be had with this stuff. And so chapter 5 is all about developmental and excuse me, sorry. It's all about development and views of development as far as delinquency is concerned. And then chapter 6 is all about gender differences in juvenile justice system. And it does focus a lot on specifically the gender difference between women and men. And we will talk a little bit about both of those. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting discussion board as well as notes. So anyway, across the board, thinking about the first part of the chapter, so we're talking about development. So please know that's not development, it's a development. Anyway, so developmental theories, these are a bunch of theories that put forward the idea that criminality or like delinquency, which we've used so far, is actually a dynamic process. And if you're not familiar with these terms, the joy of your criminal justice teacher also being an English teacher, a dynamic process means that it's not one-sided. It's not a crystal clear one-to-one. It's not that it always follows the same thing. Dynamic means that it changes. There's different components to it. There's key points throughout where things kind of have an impact. And so, truly, developmental theories are really stuck on this idea that criminality is a dynamic process. And we kind of talked about this before in last chapter. There really is this idea of biology and society broke down to the classic nature versus nurture argument. So if you're recalling, these are things we talked about last time. So yeah, this is coming back up in a little bit of a way, but there's more to it. And development in particular. So criminality is a dynamic process. It looks at biology and society. It's the nature versus nurture. But the other thing that is with development is that it's throughout the lifetime. This is not just something that starts when a child is born. This is something that happens throughout their lifetime. And so, kind of the big areas that kind of are broken down are main three developmental theories, if you will, are latent trait theory. We have life course theory. And we have trajectory. All right. And so I will tell you right now, there is a great chart on page 129 of our textbook. It's image 5.1. It is the concept summary of the three main theories, what are similar, what are different, what does each one focus on. But that's kind of what I want to talk about as a separate piece. So give me one moment while I change color real quickly. So when we talk about latent, we're going to talk about that one there. We're going to talk about that one down there. We're going to talk about this one right over here. Okay. So when we talk about latent theory, or latent trait theory, this is the idea that you're born with criminality. You are born with traits within you, and then over the course of your life, something happens where you will you will go into this life of crime. The main thing with this is, and some people view this as truth, but for latent trait theory, people do not change. Whereas life course theory, the whole takeaway for here is people change all throughout life. So for the life course theory, you have to look at where they are and what they've been through. There's no way to guarantee that just because they had this kind of background means that they're going to turn into this. People change throughout their life. They could be a criminal one day and a reformed citizen the next. That's the essence of life course theory. This is a very strong nurture argument, whereas this one is a very strong nature argument. And then when we talk about trajectory theory, this tries to find the middle ground. This is really, each case is unique. The individual trajectory of a person's life can be impacted at several different locations. And so people change throughout their life, yes, but they're also born into situations. This is the we can have the best of both worlds kind of theory. But the big takeaway and what makes it different from the other ones is for trajectory, we have more than one path to criminality. Traditionally speaking, with these, there tends to be one path. But down here, trajectory is more than one path. And so that really is the excuse me, the one of the big differences between those three theories. But it's important to note that, they are all just that, theories. And that's kind of an important piece that I'm trying to be careful with saying, but a theory means that it's not an exact science. There's still potential ways to be proven wrong, but it is fairly supported, and so that's kind of important. But so real quick, when we talk about developmental theory and developmental process, we do have to talk about I was going to say my pen stopped working. Whoops. Forgive me. Sheldon and Eleanor Gleck. And these are fundamental, foundational rather, not fundamental, our foundational people from the 1930s. I know I don't often give you dates, but yeah, from the 1930s, their whole shtick, their whole thing was they followed the lifestyle of juvenile delinquents in a longitudinal or a long-term study over the course of their lives, and they found, among other things, they definitely found some biological factors, but they found out that the most important factor that all delinquents had in common were family relations and emotional ties with parents. Now, I'm adding quotations around parents because we have some more modern data that shows us, legal guardians, that whoever a child identifies as parent, this tends to be that important person. So they found that juvenile delinquents that had good family relations and strong emotional ties with their parents, these are the ones that would get away from delinquency and would eventually go back to a normal society person. Whereas if family relations were lacking and there was not an emotional tie with parents, they became repeat offenders and went through this whole process. Another thing that kind of came with this was the age of offense. This is not directly related to Sheldon Noel or neglect, but when we talk about delinquency and we think about this as an important factor, we think about how society has factors and whatnot. When we think about this life course theory, the age of offense, the age when an individual goes into it, really does make an impact, makes a difference when we consider. Sorry, I should probably write my ideas instead of just talking. So really, the age of offense comes down to when, how old the individual was when they first entered the system, and so there's a lot of different things, and I just want to read something from the text real quick. Excuse me, because I think it's very important to mention. So this is on page 134, and under problem behavior syndrome. Just real quick, problem behavior syndrome is just a cluster of antisocial behaviors. When we think about the age of offense and we think about juvenile delinquents, there was a study done and research showed that there are certain qualifying factors that are higher likelihood that you would be a juvenile delinquent based off of these factors. And so that's just right here from that page. And I just want to read it because it's not actually important for me to write it down. It's more important to me to talk through it. So research found that if the following problems behaviors are clustered together, they're individuals more likely. So youths who drink in the late elementary school years, who are aggressive, and who are attention problems are more likely to be offenders during adolescence. Youths who engage in non-suicidal harmful behaviors such as self-cutting have also experienced abuse and stress. Youth who are less attached to their parents in school and have antisocial friends are more likely to be offenders. Youths from neighborhoods where drugs are easily available are more likely to be offenders during adolescence. Juvenile delinquents with conduct disorder who have experienced and observed violence, who have been traumatized, and who suffer from a wide spectrum of psychopathology have high rates of suicidal thoughts and attempts. And finally, delinquents exhibit a complex combination of externalizing behaviors, including conduct disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, drug abuse, familial and interpersonal difficulties, such as conflict with parents, and low intelligence. TDLR, we've found that through all the research, these are things that group together that we found with juvenile delinquents. Now, it's important to note that just because something is connected or seemingly connected doesn't mean it actually is connected, but we still need to identify that this is like a big red flag saying if we see these things, we should be paying attention. And so we're not always the greatest, but, we could. With continuing on with life course theory, I'm just going to write LCT next to this so we know what we're talking about. The other thing with this is, in particular, there's this sub-theory, age-graded theory. And all it really is that, there are different places throughout the age of offense where, there's key moments. And that's actually the big highlight in what I wanted to talk about. I'm sure if you've ever talked to someone who has been in trouble for something, they'll tell you that was a turning point in my life. Recovering individuals from addiction will tell you when they had a turning point. People who have been abused and have been through difficult times will tell you when that turning point is. There's something to this idea that even in juvenile justice, there are turning points. These key moments in developmental cycles in people's lives where just the right amount of intervention or the right amount of whatever it may be makes the impact in their lives. And so that's what I wanted to emphasize from this. Just was that, turning point actually happens. Or rather, there's something to this idea of turning points as far as how it relates to the juvenile justice system. With age-graded theory, the other thing, other than turning points, is the idea of social capital. And if you're like, what the heck is social capital? If you're familiar with business or interpersonal relationships, this should be a familiar concept. But social capital is the idea that you are building a reputation. Capital is, in financial terms, something that you can hold that has weight. So social capital is weight that you hold within a larger society or an individual group. So part of age-graded theory is the idea that social capital, or specifically that a delinquent is trying to accumulate or gain or garner some level of social capital with their peers and the rest of society. And that's actually the motivation for an individual to turn away from delinquency and go, non-delinquent, go to be a productive member of society. Now, I'm going to pose this question, and it might be related to a discussion board, but one thing that this chapter does talk a lot about and goes back and forth on is biology, nature, versus society, nurture. And I just want to put it out there. Is criminality a genetic thing? I want you to really think about that. I want you to ignore the whole nurture aspect, the whole society impacts these. is criminality, is being a criminal, a biology thing? Is it a biological factor, something that we have inside us? Just worth thinking, putting that out there. Um, so, one thing that I am going to talk briefly about is Gottfriedson and Hershey's general theory of crime. And so, their general theory of crime, it takes the idea of like social control or social capital and this kind of stuff and turns it into, this. There are generalized ways of viewing how crime goes about and things like that. And one of the particular things that they do with general theory of crime is that, they separate the delinquent from the crime. So these are two individuals. For general theory of crime, for our authors, or specifically Travis Hershey and Michael Gottfriedson, we have the delinquent tends to be, rational being. Especially when we think about the fact that juvenile delinquents, kids rebel. This is a kind of normal thing. The idea behind this is with this, the idea is that the threat of punishment works. That because a delinquent is a rational being, even though kids rebel, the threat of punishment will stop them from actually doing it. But the delinquent act, the crime, if you will, they are done because so we've talked about this before. It's the result of availability or access. The idea that they're more of crimes of convenience than a crime of passion or anything of that nature. And there is something of a biological factor that I do want to bring up real quick. Our text brings it up, and I want to bring it up as well. Our authors seem to put forward this idea that impulsiveness and self-control is kind of tied to criminality, or rather, if an individual lacks self-control and is highly impulsive, they tend to engage in criminal activity more frequently than I don't want to say normal, because normal is not the right word. Typical, potentially neurotypical individuals. Like, there's something to it. And so, thinking about my question I posed, is criminality biological? if someone is prone to be impulsive and lacks self control, and it's a biological factor, not a societal factor, does that mean crime is biological? Sorry, I like to play these kinds of games and dig deeper into stuff just to see thoughts and that kind of idea, I guess. And so we did talk about it before. The chapter goes on to talk about trajectory theory a little bit, but I emphasized the big difference, and that is that everyone is different. And for me personally, I kind of see that side. I'm not saying that any one way is right or wrong, but I do think that there's something to be said about trajectory theory as a whole. But we do have a theorist that I do want to talk about, Rolf Lober. Rolf Lober breaks down this idea that truly there are three paths to a delinquent career. And so the first one is authority conflict pathway. Second one is covert. And the third one is overt. Okay. And so, as a brief overview of what those terms mean and how they play into all this, I'm just dropping things left and right. Sorry. So, authority conflict is this idea that at an early age, there's stubborn behavior that eventually builds into defiance, typically just disobedience, wanting things their way, all the way up until they hit this point of avoiding authority or going directly against authority. So this pathway is one of the more obvious ones. We see it build from just, being stubborn to downright defiant. Covert is less obvious. I want to say sneaky only because it starts with things that are underhanded, as the text says, underhanded behavior. This is stealing. This is lying. Eventually, it leads to some kind of property damage, and it eventually escalates to something more serious. This can be joyriding, pickpocketing, larceny, fencing, bad checks, using stolen credit cards, stealing cars, dealing drugs, breaking, entering. The idea is that it starts with something seemingly small and you would never think would actually lead to a life of crime, but it does. And then the overt pathway it's aggressive, and it starts aggressive. It just escalates continuously. So it begins with annoying or bullying, and then it eventually leads to physical. So it just keeps building and building. So physically aggressive, defiant, and we're going to say that you start from sneaky and go to big issues when we talk about covert pathway. But yeah, this is pretty basic breakdown of Ralph Lauber's 3 pathways to delinquency, and I thought it was important enough that I really wanted to emphasize this to you all, because I think it's important to note that even within these theories, there are sub-theories, and some of them are, I don't know, easier to understand than others, I guess, at times. Anyway, so one thing with somehow, oh yeah, I was like, I skipped something in my notes. Sorry about that. So overall, coming back to the main point of the chapter, wherever my pen is, not delinquent, developmental. That's the word. So thinking about developmental theories, so everything above, everything that we've talked about so far in this lecture video, thinking about developmental theories, there is something to talk about. Prevention aspect. So this is where, if you remember, I said this in week 1. I'm sure I said it in week 2. I'm probably said it in week 3. Oh wait, no, week 2 there's not a video. Sorry, week 3 I said it, and I'm saying it again. In juvenile justice, you are not just criminal justice, you are social work. So yes, the law is an important aspect, but you also have to understand the social aspect of it. And so thinking about specifically prevention as far as the above developmental theories, there's actually a really easy and obvious answer, and it's kind of weird to think about. Especially when I zoom out here in a second and go back up. Improved parenting. Wow. Improve parenting skills. It's almost like I said all the way up here. Sheldon and Eleanor Gleck in 1930s said that, guess what? Family relations, and especially the emotional ties with parents, tends to have a big impact on juvenile delinquency. And sure enough, right here, developmental theories and prevention. One of the key ways that we do prevention for juvenile delinquents is by improving parenting skills. There are also, and this is the other piece to say, there we are. What is it? Multi-system, yes. So we also need to talk about multi-system programs. And these include schools, church, community things, the family. So yes, there's parenting skills, but like multi-system programs in particular work because they work from a almost like a buckshot approach. Scatter, you just hit as much as possible. So the idea with a multi-system program is for at-risk kids, you hit them personal, social, educational, and family services. You hit them everywhere you can, and you provide any kind of support that could help. There's a lot of different things out there regarding this, so it's worth noting that there is some significant research on multi-system programs working as far as juvenile delinquency prevention. Again, the foundational research tells us this makes a difference. It is not just biological. It is not just sociological. It is not just Kids are born into this situation and then they go through this situation. No, there are key moments. There are turning points where we can make an impact and help a potentially troubled youth avoid being part of the juvenile justice system. So that was chapter 5. I am going to take a quick break. The next video will be chapter 6, and because I was able to do it in one video here, we'll do it one video in that one. But anyways, thank you. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.